Yeah, so I guess at your senior year, you finally just left the house and moved in with your grandparents. You just had enough of the whole.
Yeah, I moved in with my grandmother my senior year. It was a lot of things going on. It was the fact that I was a part of a blended family. So my mother had gotten remarried for the second time,
Okay.
and they were having some issues. I had a step brother, and that was problematic. Just you have two different households trying to come together, so it was a lot of drama and tension in the house. On top of my mother still dealing with her own personal issues. So for me, it just felt like the best place to go was
Yeah.
to be with my grandmother, who had been a constant, force in my life for my entire life. I mean, me and my grandmother were very close. So, I just sort of started making those weekend visits a little more frequent until they became daily, until I just moved in.
Yeah. And I just want to add, before I kind of close out this section, is that ultimately your mom did get cleaned up,
Oh, yeah.
and she's now earning her master's degree.
Yeah, I mean, that's my mother. I tell her this all the time because, again, when you're carrying those degrees of shame, the shame of sexual abuse, the shame of poverty, the shame of drug usage, that you can have a lower feeling of self-worth. And I tell her all the time that she has one of the greatest redemption stories that has ever been told, to have lived through all of that and now be, within inches of getting her master's degree. It says a lot about her fortitude and will, and it's a big reason why, no matter what drama has gone on in my professional life and even my personal life, my worst day will never equate to what her worst day was.
Right. And I'm sure her daughter becoming a role model probably played a role in her, what I'm saying, in her getting out of that cycle as well.
My mother, I mean, she definitely wanted to, overcome some of these things for me because I had to depend on her. But a lot of it she had to do for herself, of wanting better for herself. And I think that was a big part of it too. And when she decided to go back to school to get her bachelor's degree, one thing that she told me was that not just me, but my grandmother as well, who also had her master's, that we were her inspiration, that we inspired her to go back to school. And even though, I mean, I would have never have judged my mother's intellect based off what degree she did or didn't have, but it's something that she felt like she really wanted to prove to herself that she could do, and I couldn't be proud of her for having accomplished it.
Yep. So you're kind of going through high school, through this kind of crazy home life, and you graduate high school. And did you get good grades overall?
I did. I got an academic scholarship that allowed me to go to Michigan State. So I was a National Honor Society student. I was, newspaper geek.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a black nerd before we knew what black nerds actually were.
Right. So with all that, you still managed to maintain exceptional grades. You go to Michigan State University. And did you already know what you wanted to do at that point, career-wise?
I'm one of the lucky ones. Like, I've known since I was basically in ninth or 10th grade that I wanted to be a sports journalist. Back in those olden days, you actually had to read the newspaper to keep up with your favorite sports teams. So that developed my love of newspapers. And fast forward to high school, our high school newspaper was actually produced at the professional paper, the Detroit Free Press.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it was
Okay.
all the high schools in Detroit produced their paper at the Free Press.
Wow, that's dope.
Well,
I've never even heard of that.
It came out once a month. It was a special insert in the regular edition. And so going to a newsroom, being exposed to a newsroom at 15, 16 years old, it was this energetic, awesome, thriving, exhilarating place. And I wanted to be a part of that. And so between reading newspapers and working for my high school newspaper, I kind of fell in love with what was going to be my life's work, which I know is very unusual. A lot of people bounce around. They try a couple different careers. They might have a couple different majors before they settle on something they really want to do. But for me, it was love at first sight when it came to journalism.
Yeah, and you actually got to see newspapers when they were doing well.
Yeah.
Unlike
Yeah,
today,
yeah. This was pre-internet, when they were booming and thriving.
Yeah,
and
this was like late 80s, early 90s. Yeah.
it was like early 90s and then
Yeah.
throughout. And when I left newspapers in 2006, it was just starting to kind of dip downward.
Okay, so you go to Michigan State University and you graduate in what?
4 years.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, 1997.
In what major I meant?
I majored in journalism.
Okay, so you already,
Yeah.
you already knew.
The path was already charted.
Okay, and why sports?
Well, I played sports growing up. I was the neighborhood tomboy, and I also watched sports. And clearly, I read about sports because I wanted to follow my favorite sports teams. I was always drawn to the drama, the theater, the competition with sports. And as I continued to learn, the more I knew about sports, there were some pretty amazing stories. And I love the way that sports kind of brought people together. There's very few things in this country we all do together. We don't pray together. We don't worship together. We don't do a lot of stuff together. But one of the things we do is watch sporting events together.
Oh, okay. Because during, I mean, you're talking about, I'm kind of doing the timeline here. You being in high school, you didn't see females announcing or really talking about sports on television. Really?
Yeah, I was
Really at all? I'm trying to think. Am I wrong here? Or?
No, it was a little bit like the Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah.
To be a female sports reporter
On TV.
But I was very lucky because I started working for the Detroit Free Press in high school. I got an apprenticeship there. Then I started answering phones in the sports department. The reason why that was very key is that they had two women sports reporters on staff. One of them was Johnette Howard, who was my mentor. The other was Michelle Kaufman. And then there was a third who used to be a sports reporter, but she was covering cops, L.A. Dickerson. So those women, between the three of them, made a huge impression on me, took me under their wing. It's a big reason why I wound up going to Michigan State. And because I saw them and saw the modeling, then I knew it was possible. And one thing I definitely try to tell aspiring female sports journalists is just to give them a sense of place, because the belonging part is huge. I always knew that this was a space I deserved to be in. So I never felt like an outsider. As much as people may have tried to make me feel that way, I felt like I deserved to be in this space as much as any man did.
Definitely. Okay, so you graduate and, leading up to, you joined ESPN in 2006. So leading up to ESPN, what kind of jobs were you doing?
Yeah, it's interesting to me when I run into younger folks who are like, oh, I grew up watching you on ESPN. I was like, wow, that makes me feel old. And two, I realized that a lot of people don't know that I had a full-scale print career before I even got to ESPN. ESPN was never on my vision board. There was not a destination place for me. I never wanted to do television. I only wanted to be a print reporter. I mean, my dream was to work at Sports Illustrated. So before I even got to ESPN, I was a general assignment sports reporter at the News and Observer in Raleigh. I left Raleigh. I came back to Detroit to cover my alma mater. I covered Michigan State football and basketball and did a bunch of other stuff for the Free Press in between. I was there 6 years. And then I got my first columnist job when I was 28 years old. I was a sports columnist for the Orlando Sentinel. And that's where ESPN hired me from. So I was pretty locked in on being one thing. And once I got to ESPN, my career spun in 25 different directions.
Okay, right. So by the time ESPN came knocking, you had years and years of
Yeah,
experience.
I had almost 10 years in the game.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't want to talk about how much of success is based on repetition.
Yeah. No, that's in journalism. I'll borrow something a friend of mine said, Wesley Lowery from the Washington Post. And it's true, like journalism is treated as an academic pursuit, but it's really a trade because
Yeah.
you have to practice it and keep doing it
Yeah.
in order to get better. It's why you don't necessarily have to major in journalism to be a journalist, but the more you do it, the better you get at it, the more confident you feel.
Yeah.
And, you wake up one day and you're actually good at your job.
Yeah, no, I look at some of my early interviews and I'm like, it's painful to
Yeah, it's the
to
same here. I
watch.
look
Yeah.
at some of my early clips and the sentences I was stringing together, the simplicity of which I wrote versus what I wrote now, I cringe.